Hello, friends. We decided to give you an update on the war that's been going for a few days now. Joining us is the special guest for the show, Mr. Ella Min. He is the Secretary of War. Hello.
Hey,
Okay, so
yeah. Well, thanks for
yeah, thanks for
having me
yes,
back for the second
yeah,
half.
yeah. Please let's talk about the war. Why? Um, a lot of people are confused as to all the social media uh, noise messages. Let's get into
Yeah,
it, please.
yeah. Well, a lot of this really boils down to the true nature of what Eve is about, or what it should be about.
Yeah.
And for the Golden Horde, for this war, so far, very much it's been about concerns about the few ruining it for the
That's
many.
right.
Um, and in particular, we've been talking a lot about botting.
That's right.
A lot of the social media, a lot of what we're talking about when we are discussing this on social media or in other places is concerns about botting. And I want to talk about that a little bit and why we're concerned about it and why we're willing to put our resources and energy into combating that to some extent.
Yes.
Um, I also want to talk a little bit about some of the backlash that we're seeing, and some of the concerns that people have about this being about race, because that is a huge
Yeah.
concern. That's something that no, especially this game, should never be about race one way or the other. And while we have no intention of it being about race,
Exactly.
there is a danger that it can fall into that, or that people can start thinking in that way. And that's something that we very much want to talk about, because it shouldn't. That shouldn't, like,
Yeah.
that sort of thing should not be a casualty of war in Eve Echoes. That's not what this game's about. So I want to talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah.
Um, Starting with botting a bit.
Yeah.
Like, botting has a fairly thin line. There's a very thin line between using scripts
Yes.
to manage all of your boxes, or all of your multi boxes, and just multi-boxing. And we
Synchronized.
in the Golden Horde. Oh, go ahead.
Synchronized command, right? Synchronized. So you
Hmm.
press one button, it does the
Um,
same on all the screens.
yeah,
That's the, yeah.
I mean,
Please.
I love efficiency, right? Like, that's when I'm not playing spaceships. I'm a project manager, so I love efficiency. I love making things efficient. But the part of the problem is it's a really slippery slope.
That's right.
We have multi-boxers, right? In GHA, we have multi-boxers, and that's fine. If you want to try to play with multiple accounts at the same time, that's not something that the terms of service disagree with. That's something that you're able to do,
That's right.
right?
It's legal.
The problem is when you start actually using scripts and commands to control all of those bots, and that's where we start to have a problem. And the trick is that alliances and corps really need to self govern on this.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard to take a video and say this is botting or this is multi-boxing.
Yeah.
There are some very clear giveaways, right?
Yeah.
If you see a ship get blown up, the pod warp back, come back with a ship, get blown up, warp back, come back with a ship, and then if it starts coming back as a pod and it just keeps coming back, and every time you target it, it warps away. Like, if you sit uncloaked and it doesn't do anything, and then the moment you target it, it tries to get away. If you start to see that same kind of robotic
Yeah.
response, it's a pretty good chance it's a bot. But not all the scripts are quite that clean, and not everybody is able to say, "Oh, that's a bot. That right there, that's a bot."
Yeah.
The other another good giveaway is when you see synchronized lasers,
Yeah.
as people like to call it, the disco. One of my friends, like, he runs several retrievers at once, and he refers to it as his mining disco.
Yeah.
Right? There's lasers popping all over the place because you have to go and tell each one of your people to do something. Well, one of the indicators is when you see all the lasers line up on the same server tick.
That's right.
That's really, really hard to do as one person. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe you might be able to pull it off, but again, it's another chance of botting. And part of the other problem here is this is meant to be a game where you show up and you try and shoot the person, right? You don't show up and try to video the person. It's not like, you know, It's not like photography in the outback, right? You're and this is kind of leading into why we're in this, and that is um we the Golden Horde, we've in our individual corporations have always been very particular about policing our own botting.
That's right.
If we find out that we have somebody in one of our corps who is botting, we'll investigate it to the best degree we can, and we'll actually look to see, hey, are they botting? We'll see if they're out, and we'll go see if we can get them on comms, or we'll go see if we can get them to respond to us. A lot of our corps actually have no AFK rules. Like, hey, you're not allowed to mine AFK. It's too dangerous, and we don't want to lose the resources. These allow us, when we find somebody that's botting, we kick them out. And it's not because we're afraid of the terms of service, and I'll go over that in a minute, why we're not afraid of terms of service on that. It's because it's bad for the game.
Right.
It creates a scenario where certain people start to get an advantage that the people who are following the rules don't.
Right. It's game breaking.
Yeah. And what's really unfortunate in this game is that there are a lot of folks, like corps, specifically corps and alliances, are incentivized to allow botting.
Of course.
Because if you get people in your corp and alliance who are botting, they're shoving resources into your corp, and typically that's what they're doing. They're pushing those resources up, and if they get discovered, their accounts might get taken away.
Right.
But the amount of is you can make botting, you can very easily afford to plex your own accounts for a tiny fraction of what you're making.
Yeah.
And if you lose those accounts to the user agreement or the licensing agreement, okay, you can go create new ones. All you need is a new email account, right? Like, it's not that hard to just replace those. And so it requires somebody external to come and say, hey, look, I see botting. It then requires the devs to take time out of, building the game and making it fun for people to go and police this, and they don't want to do that. That's time that they're not coming up with new features. And then it snowballs, right? Like you lose your things as a corp, you lose some bots, you just get some more,
but at the same
and
time,
now you've got all these resources that you're piling up.
Let me just add that at the same time, we are pushing the devs really hard. They just haven't been, like you said, they're doing their job, they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is fixing the game itself or updating the game, not.
Right.
Okay. Anyways,
and that's a good thing,
we're
right?
running short on time. I know you have to go soon.
Yeah.
Just you talked about. Yeah. Please, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the last piece I really wanted to say here is, Eve is meant to be about the people. It's meant to be about the diversity. For those that are really concerned about this being an issue of race, I know that even within marketing, but also within the military, one of the things that I'm really excited about is right now we're in the process of translating a lot of our doctrines, a lot of our documentation that we have into so many different languages. And that's great. I love that. I love how diverse we are.
Yes.
Eve is about shooting each other, blowing each other up, and then going and grabbing a beer afterwards,
Exactly.
right? Like, that's what this game has always been about. It's been about getting to know the other people and the other cultures.
Again,
and
it's the response that I'm really upset about. Is the response from everyone else is that don't shoot. Let's not play the game. Let's just play the war on social media about racism. I'm like, what? No, that's not. We're not playing that game. We're playing the Eve. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and in that way, wars are about content too. We want to be able to have big fights and blow up each other's spaceships, but we really want to be able to do it without having to worry about botting and without having to worry about racism, right? This is supposed to be about having a game, and a lot of that comes through trust. Like, this is where the racism comes in. Is that trust in a game like this is hard to earn. I mean, especially Eve, where half of the history of Eve is backstabbing. Building that trust comes through communication, and communication gets infinitely harder when one of you doesn't speak the same language as the other one of you. And that gets really hard. So a lot of this comes down to actions. And here's where a lot of this war comes from is you can have a conversation with somebody and they can say that they're going to really crack down, or they're really going to do something about botting, or they're going to, hey, we're going to hold this line. We're not going to go past this line. We're not going to allow our members to raid past this area, or we're not going to bot, or whatever. Because the language barriers makes it really hard to work that out through a conversation, which is what usually happens within the Horde, right? Like when we have somebody violate our own charter, we talk about it. We have arbiters. We have an entire system devoted to that. If you can't have that communication between yourself and another alliance, then it has to be about actions. If you say, hey, we don't bot, and we keep seeing these telltale giveaway signs that you're allowing botting, and we tell you about them, hey, look, here's a bot. We see a bot. Please investigate it. And we see that same person out doing the same thing with no recourse, no response. Yeah. I'm sorry. We're going to say, yeah, you're botting. We don't want to be the police of New Eden here. We don't want to be the police of that. But the big concern, here's the really big reason why it matters. If botting is allowed to continue, if people keep using botting, what ends up happening is they start getting this advantage. They start getting a resource advantage. And right now, we're still early in the game, and that's not really a big deal. We get about halfway into Sov. The people who are botting, if they are able to continue to bot, they're going to have such a resource advantage on everybody else who's following the rules that there's not going to be a null sec. There's going to be one additional empire around the whole of nullsec, and if you aren't party to that, then you might as well go home.
I see all the rule.
And that's when the game ends. Yeah. That's when it stops being fun.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what we want to avoid. We really don't want to be in a position where we're trying to fight a war against something that we can't possibly come up against in the future. And the only way to do that is to really call attention to the botting now.
That's right.
And that's why we're in this war.
That's right. Well said. Thank you. Anything else? We're at the 12-minute mark.
Yeah. I guess, if we do the typical shout-outs at the end here, I really want to give a shout-out to all of the people in our corp who are fighting so hard to be welcoming and accepting of all the different people that we have in our corp. We've got easily several different languages. I know that there was a big push recently to really get rid of any use of the term, of terms that are just not tasteful, right? Like education, on what, and I apologize. It's either is it Hanzi or Hanzai? Hanzi, yeah. Like, what is Hanzi? Let's call it what it is. Let's not use derogatory terms for something that we can't read. And that's really important because we have a lot of people in the Gordon Alliance whose primary language is Chinese. Yeah. Like, who are nationalist or who are from the nationality of China. They're our brethren and sister and siblings. Like,
differently, yeah.
Right. So let's be very careful. And I really want to say thank you to all the people who very quickly adjusted behavior. Because we did have people who were doing that. And it's very important to understand that that's not what this war is about. And that's not what we're trying to do here.
Well said.
So
Agreed.
Thank you from me to you.
Agreed. All right. Again, thank you for doing this update. Enjoy the rest of our conversation. See you.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the show. Our special guest today is the Secretary of War and Fleet Admiral, Mr. Ella Min from Red One. Welcome.
Hey.
Hey.
Just to throw a piece of clarification in there, I'm Fleet Admiral within Red One, not within the overall alliance. So just a little bit of a distinction for you.
I did not know that. Good to know. No, again, if you watched our episode, our broadcast on last, Friday, you probably heard his voice, Ella's voice, because he was one of our guests or co-hosts who helped us, make commentary and made the show interesting. So, yeah. Anyways, welcome. Yeah. Let's start with the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I'm excited to be here.
All right. So first, what the hell does the Secretary of War actually do?
Yeah, a lot of things. Really, what it started out with is much more on the secretary side of things. As we started getting our war machine put together and moving in the Golden Horde,
Okay.
one of the things we ran into is we had a lot of information we had to get clarified, sorted, a lot of spreadsheet work that had to get going,
Mm-hmm.
and that covered a lot of areas for everything from helping corps understand doctrine, understand whether we have ships or don't have ships coming, all the way to understanding who's interested in being an FC and where. What are we going to call them, and how are we going to make sure that they have an understanding of what they need, and how do we have an understanding of what they need?
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, what we've come to is now, as Secretary of War, I act as a voice for our actual admirals, the admirals of the Alliance, of which we have three, two of which have already been on your show, and I think you've got another episode with another one coming up or just passed.
Yes.
Yeah, so I act as their voice. I'm, in meetings with them, and whenever they come upon something that needs to happen, a lot of times I act on getting that done and working with the various other members of our military to get that done.
Awesome.
So,
awesome. Sounds like
yeah.
important. Let's talk about one of your main work or main jobs is this new what do you call this ranking system?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just get this full screen going. Da-da-da. Okay, so let's start with team leader. We have 7 ranks, right? So let's start with the lowest, the basic one. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the general idea behind these ranks was to help give some of our members that wanted to be FCs an idea of where they're at and kind of what they need to do to move along towards becoming a stronger FC.
Awesome.
As far as the team leader is concerned, what we're really looking for here is we want to make sure that everybody that wants to gather friends together and go do things can do that. And there, a lot of the stuff here, you'll notice there's a very, very low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Part of that is also in a lot of our larger fleets, we just need people who are willing to take initiative and start building those fleets, start getting other people together into groups, and preferably to build them by doctrine, right? I mean, if you have a doctrine set up for say brawlers, you want to make sure that you get all the brawlers in a group and you don't have a couple extra of some other doctrine in that group.
Yeah.
So they accidentally get warped in on something that they shouldn't have been.
Right.
So yeah, step one is really just, hey, do you want to do this? Great, do this.
Yeah.
One of the mechanics that we have to deal with a lot right now in Eve Echoes is that you can only have 10 people in a given fleet.
Right.
Or in a given team.
Right.
And so this is part of how we are trying to get that mechanic to work for us instead of against us.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm first time looking at this. By the way, it's it's funny how the responsibilities here is exactly matching with what we're. We have 2 universities. We've both been training FCs. This is exactly what we've been training our FCs for. Team warping, target assignment, and positioning anchoring. That's like basic FC. So
it's the basics.
Yeah.
I do want to make a call out real quick here to Matara, who helped us put all of these graphics together.
Oh, yeah.
I know she does a lot of work on your show, and
yes.
I cannot thank her for enough. Also for putting up with me as we were going back and forth over 3 or 4 days, constantly, adjusting this insignia or tweaking that a little bit too. So
she does. Not only that, I mean, all of our shows, all the video production, all the banners, layouts, everything is her. Like, she designs everything. So thank you for shout out. Like, we couldn't do anything without her. Okay, let's move on to the next part. So after that is team captain. Yeah.
So really what we're trying to do here is
there we go.
Being a team leader, really you just got to show up. Just start inviting people into your team.
Mm-hmm.
As we go, what's going to happen is some of our some of the ranks we're about to see in a moment here they'll get to know which of their team leaders are actually actively having things ready to go by the time the op shows up. If it's a CTA or an event,
Right.
We should have these groups ready to go before the FC, the actual FC fleet commander shows up and says, "Hey, let's do this."
Yes. I think
to that end.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say,
to
that end.
Yeah. Let me just point out the difference.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the difference from team leader is basically just, the team leader is more like a on the spot, last minute kind of deal. Like you can do it anytime, but captain is more like you've arranged your time out. Like you've arranged your schedule for this.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. You're actively doing this. Maybe you've taken a couple fleets before. Team captains are also, you're going to start getting folks that are saying, you know what, I can get a gate camp going. I'm going to get 5, 6, 7 people, and I'm going to pay attention to what we need to do an actual gate camp.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But these are also the people who are actively trying to make things happen. A lot of times it can be, when you're talking about a very large fleet, it can be very hard for a fleet commander to show up having done all of their prep, having talked to their scouts beforehand, having looked ahead to really understand what the objective is, what they need to do, where the risks are. When they actually start taking people out of the docks, if they have to spend time sorting out the teams, if they have to spend time coordinating with the team captain level, that adds so much time, and that means that they may not be able to get to their objective on time. So these team captains really end up being the team leaders, and the folks who are doing a really good job of that, who become team captains, are really showing that they can get the coordination down. And really, as an FC, coordination is key.
Yeah. I think we've Captain Harlock and Agia and I, we've talked about this in a previous episode. Is that we spent the first maybe 15-30 minutes just talking about, like you said, coordinating, forming fleet. That should not happen, right? So hopefully, with this new system, that's gonna streamline into a better, more efficient.
We're really hoping so, and we're really hoping that the people that really want to get into FCing, this is going to be that huge stepping stone. Is just, hey, show up, be ready to go.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the next one, and then you move to Ravager Captain. I like that name. Yeah,
this one's probably one of my favorites, especially because I literally thought it up out of nowhere for the name. Yeah. We actually had 5 ranks and realized that we really didn't have a couple ranks that we needed to have, and one of them was Ravager Captain. Mm-hmm. So Ravager Captain is really meant to be much more of a detached sort of role. These are the people who are able to really take initiative, really kind of do the prep work to be able to do some of those deep behind enemy lines kind of raids. These are the people who are taking the initiative to say, hey, I know that this gate needs to be camped at this time of day to try to help protect our miners, protect our PvE folks.
Sure.
They're the ones who are going out there and making a lot of our content happen. But by the same token, we don't necessarily, there's some fairly unique roles, and having the Ravager captains, these are the folks who, some of them may definitely be ready for the massive, multi-wing fleets. Mm-hmm. And some of them maybe they just don't want that yet, or they're fairly new to it and they want to get going. They want to try something new. And this is really going to be that first rank where you get to kind of go out there, and you'll note that they're working fairly directly with the regional generals. And we'll get to that rank in a bit, but our regional generals are really pivotal to the success of our military. Sure. They're the ones that are saying, this is what we need to be successful in our region. And in order to do that, they're going to be depending very heavily. We're jumping all over the place here. They're going to be depending very heavily on those Ravager captains. Yeah. You got you were jumped up to regional. Yeah. So we'll get to these folks in just a moment.
Okay. So I skipped out on.
So Wing Commander. Wing Commander is probably the most difficult role in a lot of ways. These are the workhorses of our alliance, folks. These are the folks that are carrying so much of what we're trying to do, and by that token, this is probably the most broadly defined role. Wing commander could be somebody that is actually taking several different doctrines working in coordination together out. So 30, 50, 150 person fleet, probably being headed up by wing commander. By the same token, we've got several wing commanders, so it's entirely possible that one of those wing commanders is acting as fleet commander, and the other three are each taking one of the doctrines, one of the wings.
Sure.
And there's a lot of combinations there, right?
Yeah.
Wing commanders could be in a position where, for example, with our bombers are led by a wing commander, and it's entirely possible that they may have to do a detached role, like, hey, we need you to go and hit that location while we are doing this other thing, so that we create the scenario and we create the strategic advantage that we need to be successful.
That makes sense. Yeah. So okay, next, warlords. What about warlords?
Warlord, yeah. So warlord's the big fun one, and by far my favorite graphic, by the way.
What is this graphic?
It's the Golden Horde emblem with 8 Matari cannons or Minmatar cannons around it.
That's
backed by flame.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Again,
and
amazing.
And believe it or not, Matar and I went out and actually looked at Minmatar cannons.
Yeah.
Actually we actually pulled up a graphic from EVE Online to look very closely at the Matari cannons to get them, just right so that they looked the right way.
Awesome.
But the Warlord is, again, one of those really cool sounding ones. But the important part about the Warlord is this is an individual that is really playing at probably the uppermost level of fleet command in a lot of ways. They are potentially running a multi-system op at a given time. So there's a lot, there are situations, and these are more prevalent, I think, in EVE Online right now, but we'll get there, where you need to be running a group in a couple different systems at the same time to make sure that you are protecting your flank, hitting your objective, and protecting your route back home.
Sure.
Or watching out for enemy reinforcements or even a third party.
Yeah.
And warlords have been doing this a while, and they're in a position where they can kind of take a major role. Another place I might envision this, if we're ever in the position where we, as the Golden Horde, decide that we really want to go and take it to an enemy that's in a different region than we are, well, this is the kind of person we'd say, all right, your mission is to go and do X. You're going to be basically coordinating the assault across multiple regions. You're going to need somebody that's at that level, and this is really what this is meant to be.
Sounds fun. Can't wait. All right, regional, general.
All right. These folks are kind of our linchpin right now.
Okay.
So our regional generals, we have 2. We have one for each of the regions in which we are currently operating.
Yeah.
Their job is to manage and mitigate any security risks, any potential intel issues, to fundamentally understand their region.
Okay.
And to understand what its needs are, military, speaking in terms of military, and to make sure that they have the commanders in place and the corporations that they're working with in that region have what they need to be able to defend that region.
Makes sense.
It's a huge job. It's a massive job. And the 2 individuals that we have in this position right now they're working round the clock, and they are coordinating with their wing commanders, and they're coordinating with their Ravager captains, and they already have plans and have already set up. I mean, these ranks are kind of coming a little bit after they were needed, so it took us a little time to get that sorted.
Right.
but they're doing a fantastic job, and I'm really lucky to get to work with them on a daily basis and see everything that they're doing.
Awesome. I again go back to the design. I like the logo here. It's like their job is just looking at the stars, looking at their staring
Yeah,
at
they're
beautiful stars, the same stars every day.
yeah, their insignia is particularly different than all the rest.
Yeah,
The idea was really to call out that you'll also notice that they carry the rank of general.
Yeah.
And that was based off the idea that when you're holding a sector,
Sure.
it's land, it's territory, it's much more of a general role and not so much an admiral role, right? Your job is to hold the territory
Yes.
and to manage the territory.
Makes sense, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well done. We're almost done. Admiral.
Yeah. Admirals. So, admirals,
Region.
we have three, right? We've got our three admirals, and they work in concert with one another.
Yes.
As some may or may not know, all three of them generally work in concert, but each of them has kind of a different area of focus. And this is where my job actually comes into play a lot, is to work amongst the three of them and really understand what the overall plan is, so that when I'm working with anyone else within the military structure, I'm able to then represent what that plan is. And help them to get the answers they need, even if one of those admirals doesn't happen to be online at the time. Because let's face it, we all have lives outside of this game, right? I know it's shocking to some, but that's how we keep everything moving.
Sure.
And our three admirals have done a fantastic job, and I've been really honored to be able to work with them.
Speaking of, one of our admiral, Raw, is on a different show today.
Yeah, I actually got a chance to see that.
Yeah.
That was about a couple hours ago.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, please go check it out. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was a show about FCs too.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all right. Okay, so we have
Yeah.
again.
So
again, I think the point is we try to encourage people to start being team leaders and even team captains, and then you can work your way slowly up. Right? It's open to everybody. If you can prove yourself, within the ranks, you can become an admiral someday. Right?
So. Yeah, and that's like, people should not be going into this with the idea that they're going to work their way up to admiral or even work their way up to wing commander right away. I really do want to call out to a lot of folks that the big secret to these ranks is the regional generals.
Okay.
If you want to be successful, if you want to have fun and you want to lead a team or lead a fleet,
Yes.
then lead a fleet. Go have fun, do fun things. That's content. That's what this game is about.
Yes.
If you want to do it in a way that supports the Golden Horde, talk to your regional general.
Yeah.
They're the ones that can say, hey, great, here's a target.
Yeah.
Hey, that's awesome. I need intel from this space. Or this gate go camp this gate. Even if it's not that busy at this time of day, you're going to get some. I mean, our gate camps are now that we have bubbles, they're very fruitful most of the day. Excuse me. So, yeah. Segueing a little bit off of that, one of the other things I really wanted to point out here is you'll notice that there is no such thing as an FC rank or a fleet commander. There is no such rank. And that's on purpose.
Right.
When you're in a fleet,
Confusion.
there is only ever one fleet commander in a Golden Horde fleet, and that is the person in charge. And we did that on purpose. We don't want confusion.
Okay.
If you are not the fleet commander, you should not be commanding the fleet. By the same token, fleet commander should have one or two people ready to pick up in case they disconnect, or should have one or two people ready to pick up in case they go down and they need somebody to pick up. But that's up to them. They should be setting that person. And some of the better ones will create a scenario for our people to give feedback. We want our fleet commanders want feedback. And you'll note in every single one of those, we talk about after action reports. We talk about the sort of things that you need to do when you're done so that we can learn from all of these. That's you know, that's what it takes to be an FC, is the ability to learn, the ability to look at yourself critically
Yeah.
without belittling yourself,
Hmm.
but constructively.
Oh,
So,
very well said. Yeah. I mean, my first sort of comment on that is the training part, because I'm very much involved with the university, and the question or something I hope people realize is that we can provide training opportunities, right? Backseat FCing. We have, which means we have FCs, experienced FCs, who can backseat for you, take
yeah,
your fleet and help you out, right?
you can learn so much from just doing.
Yeah.
You can learn so much just from listening.
Yes.
In fact, that's how I got my start as an FC.
Yeah.
Way back in the EVE Online days,
Okay.
what I would do is actually I'd get in comms, even when I couldn't actually be present online. I'd get in comms and I'd listen to the calls that the FC was making.
So which alliance or were you with the Goons?
No, I wasn't. Although I did hang out. Several of the higher ranking goons actually live in the same town as I do, and so I used to go and hang out and go drinking with them every month.
How come they didn't invite you to join them?
Oh, they did. They tried very hard.
Oh, okay.
I was a wormholer, and I lived in a fairly small wormhole in a C2.
So
we liked it that way.
For people who don't know about wormholes, what do you do? So you log in every day, and so you're not alone, right? You're with a group of people.
Yep. So essentially, the way a wormhole corp works is wormholes have no, like, you can't see who's in local.
Yeah.
You can say something in local, but until you say something in local, you don't show up. Nobody knows you're there. They have no idea how many people are logged on in a given wormhole system. You don't have any jump gates. Your way into and out of a wormhole system are wormholes. Go figure. And the way that works is on timers, a wormhole will spawn randomly to a. There's algorithms behind it, and certain systems can spawn to certain other kinds of systems, and there's a lot of mechanics behind it. We're not going to go into that, but the point is your front door is always moving and your back door is always moving.
Right.
And you learn every time it changes. You go and scout several systems down. You basically remap your entire neighborhood every day.
Yeah.
And it's very exciting because you can find some great potential just next door. And you can find a lot of, like, it's very risky because if you don't pay attention to who's next door, it's entirely possible that you've wormholed right into a major corporation's home. Yeah. And we've had some of our better fights that way. Right. Speaking of goons had a wormhole corporation. They didn't really do a whole heck of a lot with the rest of the goons, but they did some stuff. And I'd go drinking with Dodd Calm. I'd go drinking with them on the weekends, and then we'd be running around trying to fight each other and shoot each other during the next day. But that's how wormholes was. It was a lot of frenemies, a lot of people that you'd love to get a beer with and love to hang out with. Yeah. And as soon as you get a chance, you're trying to shoot each other because why not? That's the game.
Yeah. I personally, I love wormholes too. I never lived in it. The only times I used it were, like I said, like you said, we have scouts who are always scouting wormholes, and whenever they find something that leads to the enemy's home or whatever, we go in and create chaos that way. It's awesome. Okay.
Well, and
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, FCing in a wormhole is also incredibly different. It's when you're FCing in the wormhole, you have to try to figure out not just what your enemy's going to upship with, but what they're hiding. The entire FC world of a wormhole is understanding not just what your opponent's showing you, but looking at what they're showing you and trying to understand what they're hiding from you based on what they show you. Like certain times they would come with certain ships, and that meant they were holding this in reserve.
Yeah, yeah.
And you had to learn what those stacks were. What were the things that were going to be coming next,
Right.
so you could decide whether or not to attack. And in some cases, you figured out, you sent scouts into the right place to understand how far away their backup was, and then you used that against them. You hit them hard enough that they called in their backup, and then you closed the wormhole on them.
Yes.
So there was a lot of those kind of tactics. So it was a lot more hit and run, a lot more scrappy fight.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, sounds, again, very exciting. Hopefully they bring it to Echoes soon. What do you think about Echoes? Like, other than Wormhole, what do you expect? Obviously sovereignty. But what other features are you excited about seeing from?
I don't know. Eve Echoes for me was really. I did not expect to get this pulled in. I stopped playing Eve Online when my daughter was born, and she's 2, so I'm just starting to have a life again, and any other parents out there can understand.
Yes, yes.
I remember. And that's leading to I'm having time to play, especially with COVID. I don't get to spend time with my friends as much, and so I'm having to go and make some friends online.
Yeah, yeah. One of the main reasons why we're so committed to creating community building is so that people who are social distanced or who are locked down right now can find community and friends. So.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens with. I'm really excited to see what happens with Eve Echoes, but I'm also trying to be very mindful of the amount of time that I can give into it and to work that balance. And I know a lot of other people are as well. So we know what Eve can be. We know how constant it can be. Yes. And learning how to balance it so that you are contributing, but also not, losing your house. So,
right.
Yeah.
You also wrote a novel.
All right. So so that takes a little bit of background. Part of why my corp was a little bit smaller in Eve Online was we were predominantly a wormhole corp, but then secondarily we were an RP corp, and it's kind of a little bit of the dark side of Eve for a lot of people. But we were heavily involved in the roleplay community, and what's more, our corp was we had a lot of writers in our corp, and some people may know or may not know. There is a lot of lore that was created by the players for EVE Online. In fact, the lore was pretty heavily outsourced to the players, whether intentionally or not, for a long time. There's a lot of stuff out there to read if you ever care to do so. But for us, there were writing competitions, like 2 or 3 a year. In fact, I even helped host one year. And people would write stories based in EVE Online. And that was really cool. There was a lot of very fascinating writing and a lot of really good. New Eden is a world that is morality is a little different.
Yeah.
There's a lot more that you can play with in a lot of ways. Oh, yeah. You can really examine the human condition in ways that you can't in any other fiction universe.
Right.
And that was really neat. As part of that, at one point, one of my buddies decided that he wanted to do a quick role play, and I'll just create this little character just for what we call a baseliner. So a character that is not a capsuleer. Mm-hmm. And I just created her really for just a fun little role play to give him something to kind of play off of, and I got really into the story. I realized, I started asking myself, well, wait, what would she do next? Why did she care about this? Why was she here? And so I said, I'll write a little novella, whatever.
Okay.
16 chapters later,
wow.
I ended up writing a serial novel, which I published 1 chapter at a time on our corporation's website even. And part of it was to see if I could.
Yeah.
I decided, you know what? I want to see. I've always wanted to write. I'm going to pick the Eve universe because there's no way I could ever market it. CCP would have a few things to say about that. So I knew I was sort of creating a scenario where I could try to write, and I could always kind of write it off later as just some fan fiction or something. And in the end, I think it turned out to be pretty decent. There's a couple spots that I got on a soapbox, but
yeah. Are you gonna share this with us? Are you gonna open it up to maybe we can put it on the forum?
Maybe if there's interest. I'll tell you what, if you get a few people asking, I will open it up. Like I said, there's some spots where I get a little bit up on a soapbox. I should warn people that we had a fairly liberal group of people in our corp. One of the other points is it was one of the things I loved about that corp was it was fiercely LGBT friendly. And that was something that there were a few times during the course of the EVE Online world where that community felt very much outcast from the general world of the online. And I don't think that that's necessarily true anymore. I'm not there to tell, but I know that.
Yeah, for Goons.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we had small groups for just for LGBTs. At least for Goons, and I think Pandemic Horror had one too. I'm not sure. But.
And that's one of those things where it can be like, especially during that time in the world, there were a lot of scenarios that were just not safe, not friendly at all. Mm-hmm. And knowing that we was something that we were fiercely protective of. Awesome. But it also meant that we tended to have a very, I think a lot of people used to refer to themselves as space communists. But it's a very, it's a little bit of a dystopic utopia. And if you can figure that one out, you're doing better than me. But there are some basic principles of that, of our wormhole and the story behind our wormhole that were pretty cool. So yeah, I'm willing to open it up if people want to read it. I'm always happy for feedback. I know that it's the first book I ever wrote. And so I have not gone back to change a whole lot because
maybe, it's a way. And I know some artists do this. They will release like an introduction or a few chapters, and then to get more, they have to like go to Patreon or something.
Well, and that's the thing. Actually, one of my corp mates, that's what he did. He started writing different things for EVE Online. Discovered he actually went and wrote a bit in a 4chan prompt.
Wow!
And it's led to him becoming like the cornerstone author of an entire genre online. That's what he does now. He writes for a living a major serial novel that, frankly, a lot of people love.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The funny thing I read is the news, the EVE Online news. There's so many drama, so much drama, so much propaganda. Especially being involved with Goons, we have the biggest network of journalists and story writers. Have you read them? I mean, they're really high quality and they're really interesting to read.
So I did not read a lot of them, but I talked to a lot of their authors.
Oh, okay. Right.
So, actually, right about the time that Empires of Eve, which is actually sitting right over there, right about the time that book came out, there was an author who was looking at writing a fictionalized version of the War with Bob, specifically from the point of view of the Goons. Mm-hmm. And she had been trying to put this together for a while, and just when it seemed like she was going to be able to write it, to go, things started kind of getting like this book was on its way out, and there was a lot of basically the door closed for her, and she never got a chance to write that book. And that was one of the major catalysts for me choosing to write mine, was realizing that she spent so much time trying to create a scenario in which she would be able to write it and publish it, and not be socially attacked for picking a side in a novel, that I just decided, screw it, I'm going to write it. I'm going to put it out there. And if people read it, great. If people don't, speaking to your point, one of the advantages of doing it as a serial novel is people can read it one chapter at a time. when it comes out every month or every couple weeks, it's a lot easier to tackle a chapter every couple weeks, and it becomes much more episodic. People start really, they start getting excited for the next piece, and that really helps as a writer to be able to get into it as well, to start thinking, okay, this is what I did. It also creates a scenario where if you're one of those writers who, like me, gets a little bit, oh, is this the right thing to write? Should I have done that? I can't go back and change it. Once I write it, that's the way it is. And so I had to start getting used to listening to the character and not listening to what I wanted to build for a plot in my head. Some of my plots just kind of naturally evolved as it went, because that character, I looked back at what they had done and said, well, this is the decision they're going to make based on their history.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
Even, how long has the game been out? Like 3 months? Less than 3 months. We've had so much stories to write about, and I think to your point, it's you can write anything. You can do it for like non-fictional, just historical records, or you can just talk about your personal story, or you can just, based on what you've seen and what you heard, you can totally go fiction, right? Complete. So there's so many possibilities.
There are so many stories to tell.
Yeah.
Every person, every player, like, there are so many stories in Eve. It is such a deep and rich world that you can barely crack the surface. There's so much there.
Imagine,
and I'm just,
this is even without sovereignty. Imagine, because I think that's when the real stories begin, because you get to actually call somewhere. Yeah, go ahead.
But even then, think about it. So I've been playing with the idea of writing another book. I've got half of a plot out there. I've fiddled with it here and there, but I just don't have the time to start it. But even in the story of the Golden Horde, like, if you think about it, you start with a few random people deciding to run away from the Empire space, go deep into what in the beginning was Angel territory, and saying, okay, we're basically gonna hide out in this, because it's a faction. It's like, I guess in most cases it's a Serpentis, and in some cases it's something else. We'll take Serpentis for now. Yeah. I'm going to go hide out in this Serpentis station, pretending to be a Serpentis so they don't kill me. And I'm going to go hunt these angels. And yet I have this dream. I have this dream of being part of Valhalla or something else. Like, there's a story there. I mean, they're not sitting there going, oh, I want to be part of a new corp called Valhalla. No. They're creating this little home. Yeah. And as they get enough people, as more people start immigrating in, now they start to take over that station. Now they start to take over that quadrant. Yeah. It starts to become a story about how these people wanted to create something for themselves, based on their ideals, based on what they believe to be true. And there's a lot of fluff you can put in there, but there's a story, because there are characters and there are people. And if there's one thing that I love about writing, it's you could write forever, and there will always be a new character. There will always be something new to explore in a character.
Game of Thrones, so many characters, endless, constantly. But that's off topic. Anything else? Any stories you want to share with us? About maybe Red 1 or maybe your personal story?
Well, I mean, speaking of Red 1, I do realize that I made a huge mistake during while I was while we were calling the Horde Wars. I kept referring to Red 1's fleet as the Red 1 fleet, and I never mentioned Mizuka. Mizuka was the flight commander, or the fleet commander for that fleet, and I just want to give him a great shout out, because he is the reason I'm able to do what I'm able to do for the Corp right now. For the Alliance right now. Because for a while, I was predominantly running the military within Red 1. And when I started picking up a lot of the responsibilities that I did within the Alliance, a lot of the things, like we used to have, like, twice a month, we'd have FC, debrief. We get all our FCs together and we talk about what we had done and what we were going to do. And yep, we talk about what we had done and what we were going to do, and we talk about what was coming up, and then we usually promote a few of them from fleet captain to fleet commander, and it was a thing. We were creating a culture for ourselves, and a lot of that, like if he hadn't have kind of stepped back in and said, "Hey, I've got this," a lot of that would have fallen down, and it hasn't. And Red One's been able to grow from that to the point where now we're able to fill a lot of those key pivotal strategic roles within a fleet of having really good scouting or doing some of the more stealth stuff, or even just having those clutch pilots able to get onto that doctrine that really needs to be filled out for that fleet. So that's something that I really appreciate.
And I've been wondering, are you guys related to Reds? Are they OP4s or GenFed? Reds, right?
No. And there's a good story behind that. There was somebody who, as OP4S was breaking apart, clearly somebody had tried to create a goodwill between themselves and Red. Mm-hmm. And then they got blown up by one of our raids, and our CEO Baron got this really irate. We thought you were blue to us. What? You blue. How dare you attack us? And I think we eventually told him we're not red. Uh-huh. Red One is not red.
Okay.
No, Red One came out of our corp name is Reapers, and frankly, I don't know why Baron chose Red One, but it works. We've got Red One, and then our alts are in Red Two, and that's what we fly.
Okay. All right. We're perfect on timing. This is the 43 minutes mark. Any final thoughts or shout-outs?
I think what I really want to do is I want to give a couple shout-outs. Our admirals are really working really hard, and one of the hardest things is that there are a lot of people out there who have a lot of great ideas, and there are a lot of people out there who do the research and who understand, or who might look into a different doctrine and say, hey, we should be doing this doctrine. And kind of one thing I want to say is for all you folks that are out there doing the research and learning and figuring out, hey, what could we also do? That's awesome. Keep doing that, especially if you want to get into a role where you want to be a Ravager captain or something. Just because the Alliance has set doctrines doesn't mean you and your corp can't have a doctrine that you like to use for something. The Alliance doctrines are based off of a lot of factors that corps don't necessarily have to abide by. Right. And there are a lot of fits that may be a lot better for certain things than what the Alliance doctrines are. Please have faith that there are reasons behind why those doctrines were put that way. Yeah. And I'm sorry, we can't all have a conversation all at once about those reasons, because there's a lot of OPSEC involved in that. Yeah. And know that half of that is organization. Half of that is why I have this role. I'm trying to get a lot of that cleaned up so that the people that need to be in the right place to get that information can get it. And so that the people who we really don't want to have that information don't have it at their fingertips. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and we're really trying to make sure that we put ourselves in a good place to not get destroyed from inside somehow. So I really appreciate everybody's patience, and the good news is I'm working on getting myself a couple deputies, so hopefully we'll be able to get even more of that moving along really soon here. I really, really appreciate how much of a community the Golden Horde really is. Oh, yeah. The ability, and I've seen a lot of people shifting around trying to find corps that fit their play style a little bit differently. You're not the only one, and the reason I know is because some of them are FCs, and I'm having to try to keep track because I've had an FC roster for a while. It just has never been up to date, so I couldn't really use it yet. But yeah, there's a lot of people that are shifting around. Corps are settling; they're finding their rhythm. We've had corps that share a rhythm. different corps come in and they do a lot of the same things, and they're realizing that, well, maybe we just want to combine because attrition's a thing in this game, especially for officers.
Yeah.
There is so much to do
Yep.
as an officer in this game, and there's a lot of times when having some more officers that you can trust is a huge deal.
Oh yeah, always.
And that trust is hard earned in this kind of game. So,
So please apply to be officers. We always need more.
and be patient with the other officers.
Yeah.
Be patient as they say, well, I don't know if I can trust you yet. It's not you, it's the game. But if you're an FC, please, if you want to do that, be there on time. Help build the teams. That's step one. That's the great way to get into this thing. So
Definitely. All right.
Well, that's shout out.
Yeah, great times. Great times. Thank you so much again for chatting with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right. I will talk to you later. See you guys.
Sounds good.